Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would watch this little video that I found very, very interesting. It's not going to be that long, but all in all, it's going to be by Dante's Boxing Nation. And of course, what we know about Dante's Boxing Nation, especially with Tyson Fury, is that he hates Tyson Fury and the Fury family with a burning passion. Because, of course, Tyson Fury, he not only beat his pro black hero in Deontay Wilder, but he pretty much washed the floor with him. And especially the last two fights. I mean, the third fight was somewhat competitive. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that it was competitive to the point to where I would say that it was super duper close. Excuse me. It just is what it is. But anyways, of course, recently with the Furies, we don't necessarily know what Tyson Fury's next move is going to be after that third fight with Deontay Wilder. Just recently happened in October, I believe. However, his younger brother, I believe anyway, Tommy Fury, I do believe all in all that he is going to have a boxing fight with the YouTube star known as Jake Paul, which I think is a very, very interesting fight. Jake Paul, of course, has won all of his boxing matches so far. He had the biggest test of his career last fight against a former MMA fighter in Tyron Woodley, who, Tyron Woodley was a decent MMA fighter, but as a striker, in my opinion, he always was very, very limited. That doesn't mean that I think that he is, the worst striker that I've ever seen, but I certainly wouldn't call him an A-grade striker. It just is what it is. Tommy Fury, when it comes down to it, this dude seems like he at least is a natural cruiserweight or somewhere along those lines. And on top of that, Tommy Fury, he's going to be bigger. I believe that he has a little bit of an amateur pedigree over Jake Paul. I think a lot of people are favoring Jake Paul in this matchup, but I would not be so sure. I think that Tommy Fury, I think that he is a real deal opponent for Jake Paul, or at least a decent test for him, because Tommy Fury, is he someone that I'd take a look at and say, I think that he's going to be a future heavyweight champion of the world? Not necessarily, but I think that Tommy Fury could provide Jake Paul with a certain amount of problems. I believe that he's bigger than Jake Paul. He has boxing experience over Jake Paul when it comes down to it. And that's what's really going to make this fight very, very interesting. This is going to be the first official fight that Jake Paul has had in the sport of boxing that is actually someone against a boxer. And if Jake Paul is able to beat a Tommy Fury, I would not be surprised at all if that Canelo Alvarez fight were to happen a hell of a lot sooner than what I thought. And I don't really have a problem with that fight all in all, because to me that's pretty much similar to the Mayweather versus McGregor fight or Mayweather versus Logan Paul fight. Now, of course, certain people may say, well, Mayweather was kind of retired at that point. Canelo should be facing A-grade competition. That's understandable, but at the end of the day, I do think that Canelo Alvarez realizes what that can do, not only possibly for his career when it comes down to it, possibly even make him more popular than what he already is, but on top of that, it can make him a hell of a lot of money. Millions. So when it comes down to it, that would be a very, very interesting fight that I think possibly may come up a little bit later. That's if Jake Paul is even able to get past, Tommy Fury, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, Dante's Boxing Nation, he's going to take multiple shots, not only at Tommy Fury, but Tyson Fury, because he hates that man with a burning passion. He wishes that Tyson Fury would walk out into a street and get hit by a bus and overall was in the emergency room. That's what he wishes would happen, because he hates that man that he knocked out all in all, Deontay, the Bronze Bomber Wilder. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what he has to say.
So there it is, guys. Tyson Fury all but confirms that this YouTuber, Jake Paul, did make more than the heavyweight champion did this year. His only response was shut up and changing the subject.
This is basically Dante's Boxing Nation of trying to humiliate a Tyson Fury. Uh, Once again, Dante, all in all, when it comes down to it, you can tell that he is so over emotional in most of his takes when it comes down to it. And the only purpose of this segment, or one of the purposes of this segment, was really to try and tear down that of a Tyson Fury, to try and humiliate him and bring him down to a lower level. Now, do you think that he would do this necessarily with a Clarissa Shields, someone who does not make that much money? Or do you think he does this with a Terrence Bud Crawford, someone all in all that probably doesn't make anywhere near the same amount of money as a Tyson Fury does? That's like me saying, oh, well, Tyson Fury, he makes a hell of a lot more money than Terrence Crawford, and Terrence Crawford is a 3 division champion. Like, he should be embarrassed. But in all reality, we know that Tyson Fury, he has more notoriety because not only of his big fights with Deontay Wilder, but sometimes the heavyweight division it can just attract more newcomers because sometimes the heavyweight division, those are the fights that everyone wants to see. But Dante's not going to put it in that type of context. It's just interesting. Anyways, let's continue.
It's amazing what Jake Paul has been able to do.
But of course, Jake Paul, when it comes down to it, he is going to make more money than the majority of professional boxers, because Jake Paul, of course, has some notoriety outside of boxing. This is not the only sport when it comes down to it, or this is not the only time where a celebrity has tried to get into a boxing match, or they've tried to do something and, it caused some extra upheaval, or it caused them to get more views. I mean, let's say all in all that, let's just bring this up for example. Let's say that Rihanna, let's say that, the world class singer Rihanna, all in all, let's say that she tried to get into boxing. And let's say that eventually she wanted to get in the ring with Claressa Shields. Of course, if she were to have a boxing match, even if it were against a complete nobody, even if it were against a boxer that had a losing record, no one would care and everyone would watch it because, the expectations, they're not that high. But because Rihanna is so well known as a singer, of course she's going to attract a certain amount of money, even more than that of professional boxers. And that's why, in my opinion, it would actually do Claressa Shields some good to humble herself and actually be on the undercard of a Jake Paul. Because Claressa Shields, I mean, it's no offense against the women boxers, but Amanda Serrano clearly can, Amanda Serrano clearly can tell all in all that the women boxers usually, they're not going to get anywhere near the same amount of viewership, all in all, if they're just by themselves or on another boxing undercard. Because, truth be told, and this is not me trying to insult them, but no one usually cares about women's boxing. Because like I said, and I've said this in the past, that usually has been more of an eyesore than what it usually has been a joy to watch. It just is what it is.
In terms of the money that he's making before he even had a fight against an actual professional boxer. Because once again, this will be the first time he fights a professional boxer. And I think a lot of it to blame is the fact that now in boxing, we have to once again wait so long in between fights to get real fights. Or of course, when you have the UFC,
I don't think it's really anything to blame. I just think that when you have a celebrity that tries to, convert into a sport, of course people are going to watch it. It just is what it is. When CM Punk, who of course was a former WWE wrestler, he tried out UFC, everyone was watching it. Literally everyone was watching it. It just is what it is. When you have a person that has a decent amount of notoriety and they especially go into boxing, they especially go into MMA or fighting, because that's a sport that usually a lot of people can try to do. Because a lot of people, who end up actually as MMA fighters or boxers, they never usually planned to be that in the first place. Like Evander Holyfield and Deontay Wilder, they didn't even want to be boxers. They wanted to be football players. A lot of these boxers, they ended up doing this because they were very gifted athletes, but they did not end up doing the career that they ended up wanting to do, whether it be basketball or football or something of that sort. It just is what it is. Some of these fighters, they ended up just going into boxing or MMA fighting because they needed to put foods in the family's mouths or their own mouths. So, like I said, a lot of these boxers, when it comes down to it, they're very, very, talented, possibly even in other areas, are very good athletes in other areas. But it is what it is. But Jake Paul, he's been able to take advantage of the boxing scene, and I really don't have a problem with that. Whatever he does, that's his business. All right, it is what it is. And so far, I'm not going to say that he's looked great, but, for the amount of training that he has had and for the little amount of time, you can tell that Jake Paul actually does have some boxing talent. I'm not going to say that it's A grade, but for the little amount of time that he has been boxing, you can tell that, boxing is something all in all that he's actually not the worst at. That's what I'm going to say. I've certainly seen worse.
Putting on real fights every week, every month. If boxing was like that, the sport would be much bigger than it is. But when it's the way it is right now, you got people like Jake Paul that can take advantage of the situation and make an enormous amount of money just for...
It doesn't matter what time frame it would be. It doesn't matter what time frame it would be. Whenever a celebrity were to go on to boxing or another sport, it wouldn't matter. People would watch that. It would be like, all in all, if someone tried to join an NBA team, and let's say, all in all, Justin Bieber or Kevin Hart, when it comes out of, some of those celebrities that play in a celebrity basketball game. Let's just say, all in all, that even one time, now I don't think that this would ever happen when it comes down to it, but let's just say even, one time, they let them play a full game when it came down to, or half a game. You know how many people would be tuning into that? You know how many people would be tuning in to see Kevin Hart or Justin Bieber play, or to see, all in all, how they do against other professional basketball players? Of course they would want to tune in to see that. So Dante, he's trying to make this point that, well, it's because boxing, big fights really don't happen. Well, of course there's certain big fights that don't happen, but I don't think that that's the reason why Jake Paul is getting so many views. He's getting a lot of views because he's just a very famous person. He's a very popular person. It is what it is.
His following on YouTube.
That's why the Mayweather versus Conor McGregor fight did so big. Now, of course, Conor, he was an MMA fighter, but he was not an actual boxer. There's a reason why that fight did so big.
But with that being said, this will be a very interesting fight. We know Tyson Fury is not really that skilled, but he has pedigree, and he has an amateur.
Now, notice, all in all, that he said Tyson Fury. Now, I'm not sure if he means Tommy Fury, but the thing is, all in all, about Dante, what we know about him is that, like I said, once again, he tries to throw Tyson Fury under the bus a multitude of times. And like I said, Dante realizes that if he ends up beating Anthony Joshua and beating Alexander Usyk, that Tyson Fury is going to be hands down looked at as the best of his generation. It just is what it is. And that's why Dante, he's been trying to degrade Tyson Fury, because he knows that if Tyson Fury defeats those two fighters, and especially ends up retiring undefeated, Tyson Fury is going to be in that conversation as the greatest heavyweight of all time, whether people like it or not. And that's what Dante sees coming. He sees it coming just like I see it coming. And Dante realizes that I can't have a dude like Tyson Fury in that conversation, so I'm going to try to degrade him now, because I don't want him overall on that level.
Background, something.
And that's the same reason with Canelo Alvarez as well. That's another reason why he tears down Canelo Alvarez's every fight.
That Jake Paul doesn't have. So we'll see how this fight turns out. I think that it will most likely favor Jake Paul, at least the way Tyson Fury has been looking. But
I think you mean Tommy Fury, but it is what it is. I'm personally going to favor Tommy Fury. I don't think that he's an A-grade fighter, but I think that he's skilled enough, all in all, to beat Jake Paul. That's my personal opinion. Plus, he's a very decent athlete. He's very decently big. He does have boxing background. This is going to be a very tough fight for Jake Paul.
Who knows? The fact that he has the pressure. Tommy has more pressure. For him to be a professional boxer and once again to be the heavyweight champion's little brother. He knows that he will be the laughing stock of boxing if he were to lose to a YouTuber who's never had a fight against a professional boxer before. Let's see how much this motivates Tyson Fury. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
Anyways, I just thought that I would review that little segment because I thought that was very, very interesting. But like I said, Dante, it just makes me laugh, all in all, his clear bias when it comes down to it and what he'll try to do with certain fighters. Dante, all in all, he's really he's really overall very, very shameless in a lot of his takes when it comes down. And once again, he really just tried to throw the Furies under the bus here in order to try and make them look bad. That's pretty much what the point of this video was. But I just find that very, very hilarious. So we'll see, all in all, what happens. Anyways, that's pretty much all I got for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later. And hopefully y'all enjoy a happy Thanksgiving.